Today's webinar, Zest Station, a new front desk for a new frontier, presented by Stayntouch implementation consultant, Chris Devlin. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at Stayntouch. Today's presentation will cover how you can get the most out of Zest Station. In this webinar, we will demonstrate how to configure Zest Station for check-ins and checkouts, learn how to integrate with mobile keys to allow for contactless check-in, and illustrate how to include add-ons and upsells to generate incremental revenue. We'll have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Chris, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just show my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Thank you so much. So for today's session, we're going to start by looking at some videos of the product, just so we can get an idea as to how this actually looks for the flow. For some of us, we probably haven't actually seen this before. So we're going to look at some check-ins and some checkouts. And I have some different kind of variances because there are some different variables that we can go through. So we're going to look at some check-ins first. We'll do a standard check-in. And then we'll look at the different options that we have for that. And then I'll take us through the different configuration fields, how you can actually set this up for your property. So the first one will be a standard check-in. So we're going to open this up. You can see the screen here. I have my little mock-up screen. And the first thing I'll point out is that we do have multiple languages enabled at the bottom of the screen. So we will talk about that too. We have 4 options here: pickup key, check-in, checkout now, and book now. So these are 4 options that you have available to you, and we'll go through that as we go through configuration. But the first one, as I mentioned, is check-in. So we'll click on play. So the guest is clicking on the check-in button. They're entering their last name, which conveniently is Test. Now you can confirm by departure date, which brings up a calendar for you. You can also confirm by number of nights, how many nights the guest is staying. And you can confirm by confirmation number. So this is just to make sure that we have the correct guest that we're pulling up. There is also an email option too, which we can use. We don't really recommend using the email option just because sometimes there's flow through emails from Expedia or booking.com or such. Now we're checking the reservation details to make sure that everything matches. And in this case, we're okay with that. Terms and conditions are prompted. So it's very much like the style of an airline check-in. You might be familiar with the airline kiosks. We're kind of mirroring that kind of flow there. Would you like to upgrade your room? Some great opportunities here for incremental revenue. In this case, we're going to say no thanks and proceed to the next screen. But I think that we're liking the chocolate dipped strawberries. I always like those chocolate dipped strawberries. So we're going to go ahead and select one of those. And we're going to continue here. To complete check-in, insert credit card. The imagery that you saw on the screen there is changeable. We can sign the screen. And congratulations, we're now officially checked in. How many keys do we need? All the text is very much configurable on these screens as well as the images. So depending upon the key integration you have, we can update that to mirror what would be the key integration you have here. I put an image in here for them to hold the key against the elevator sensor. Your welcome email is ready. So we can have a welcome email sent to them, which can include information about, Wi-Fi access codes, shuttle bus times and such. Kind of information that they may not get if they haven't had a traditional check-in experience. Your reservation is checked in and they're good to go. So fairly simple flow there. We do also have some other options, however, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's take a look at the checkout. So in this case, we have the guest selecting the checkout now option. So they're entering their last name. Next, they're entering their room number. Get to review the bill, and if you notice at the bottom, it does have an option for add a charge, which we're going to select. And at this point, we can present them with different items that we've specified that they can add to their bills. This is a great way to capture those minibar charges that might be missed for them to add that themselves before they proceed to collect the payment. So if everything looks good with the bill, we'll click on next. They have a balance due of $110. They can pay with the card on file or add a new card. They're going to go ahead and use the card on file in this case. Payment was successful. We can then email a copy of the invoice either to the email on file or we can add a new email. So we're going to verify that the email that we have on file is correct. We can click on edit my email address in case there's something wrong with it. If it's fine, we can just click on next and then send the email there. And as we'll see, a copy of your bill has been delivered to your email. So nice and quick process there. But as I mentioned, there are bells and whistles that we can activate too. So here I have an example of check-in with ID verification. Now this is staff assisted ID verification. So we're clicking on the check-in button here. So if you have the circumstance where you want a staff member to verify the identification of the customer during the check-in flow for security reasons, we do have an option where you can do this. So you would have the customer at a certain screen, which I'll show you, click on a button to call a staff member over, and the staff member would then come, verify the ID, pop in a PIN number, which we would set up in their user setup, so we know who's verified the ID, and then the guest can proceed with their check-in. So the complete check-in, insert credit card, and a screen will appear. ID verification. In order to proceed, we just need to verify your ID. Please call a staff member. So the staff member comes along. There's a secret button on the screen. They pop in their verification PIN number. And at this point, they look at the guest's ID. They verify the guest's ID with ID, or they say that there was no ID present, but they're allowing them to proceed regardless. And now we're asking the guest to proceed as they would normally. They're entering their email address and continuing with the check-in as they would. If we don't have an email address on file, it will ask them to enter it so that we can do things like send them their checkout email on departure, if that's something we're doing with Zest Web, but also just so we have their email on file. And they're officially checked in. We go through the rest of the check-in flow as per usual. And they get their welcome email, and they're good to go. Now, I do have a video from our marketing team here to talk about ID scanning with facial recognition, which is another offering that we have. And there is a supplemental to this because it does involve a third party, but it is something that's a great feature if you want to have truly staffless check-ins with Zest Station that have ID recognition with facial, ID scanning with facial recognition. So I have a quick video here, which I'm going to present for us. So again, this is just going through the regular check-in flow. The guest is entering their last name, confirming their departure date, confirming their details. Now we are verifying their passport information. So we're scanning the front of the ID in this case. It's analyzing the image, and then it's going to ask to scan the back of the ID. And now we're going to take a picture of the guest. Now this is not Daryl, so it's failed, but we can tap to retake. And this is Daryl, so it should succeed. And it was accepted. So it's going to allow him to continue through, and he's officially checked in. And they can go through the process of making keys, and the guest is all checked in. So that's a really great option for those customers who really want to have that full staffless experience for check-in, but also make sure that the guest has the ID scanning as part of the process. So that's something that we can offer. And if you're interested in that, it's something you can reach out to your CSM or open a support ticket, and we can get you in contact with the right person to get the ball rolling with that. Now, a third option is pick up keys. So if a guest has lost their key, if they need to have a new key or a duplicate key, that's something that we can certainly set up for them. So there's a simple flow for that. You choose the pickup key option. You're going to enter your last name. This is the simplest flow that we have here. Last name and room number. And you're checked in. How many keys do you need? Go ahead and make a key. And once again, they're going through that same flow, and they're done. Very simple. We do have a security feature, however, where we can enter the last 4 digits of the credit card on file, and that's the setting right here. So let's take a look at that. Enter your last name, enter your room number. Please enter the last 4 digits of the credit card we have on file for your stay, or select a new credit card. In this case, we're going to do the last 4 digits of the credit card on file to verify that we are the right guest. And we are the right guest, so we're able to proceed, and we can go ahead and make our keys. So just an extra step of verification that we can enable for you. So those are some of the options. Let's take a look at the settings and how we configure all of this. So here I am in the hotel that we were playing around in. All I need to do this is actually navigate to the menu and go into our settings area and into settings here. And all of this is contained in the very last option under Station for Zest Station. So where you see Zest at the top, that's for Zest Web, that's for the email component. For Station, it's at the very bottom. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is languages. If we go to the languages area, this is where we enable our default language, which is very important. Otherwise, there might be no verbiage on the screen. So we want to go in there and enable and make it default. If it's a different language that you'll be using, just select that language and make it your default for you. There will be a JSON language file attached for you. If you don't have that, just reach out to us and we'll make sure that we have one in there for you. And what you can do in here is you have this little pencil icon. And if you click into the pencil icon, you have access to all the different tags that appear. And you can go in there and make amendments to any of the text that appears on screen. So anything that has to do, for example, if the word is take, if we type in take, we can take care of your luggage, please take your keys, now take the elevators. So you see everywhere that it appears and you can go ahead and change it. If it involves the word key, you can do the same thing, pick up key, so whatever it might be. If you have the word room and you don't want it to be room, you want it to be suite, again, you can go in and make changes there, click on accept changes and then save changes. If you want to add new languages, all you have to do is simply click on the drop down here, right click and save your English JSON file onto your desktop. And then let's say that we wanted to add Japanese, for example. We can go into Japanese, we can attach that English file that we've just saved, and then all we would have to do is enable it. And in each of the database fields, we would just have to have someone go in there and change each of these into the Japanese equivalent. That's all we'd have to do to make that the Japanese file. And then you would have Japanese as an option for your customers to use. So let's go back to our main menu here under Station, and let's take a look at our general options. So in general, we have the 3 home screen options: pick up keys, check out, and check in. But you might recall there was a 4th one on the screen, which was our booking engine. So if you want to, you can have a booking engine book now option enabled, and that's just this activate booking engine pop-up. And all I've done is I've dropped in the booking engine link that I have. It's one of our test ones. But if you have a web booking engine, you can put that in there and it allows the guests to book now. And so how that looks, for example, and this is a bit of a cheat here. If I go to my URL, pms.stayntouch.com, notice it says admin followed by / and H. Now you can actually navigate, if I go between the pms.stayntouch.com and the H, and I go and write Zest_Station and hit enter, it's actually going to bring me to my kiosk. It's very sneaky. And here you can see the 4 different options that we have. And I have my book now. So if I click on here, it just brings up, this is a demonstration one, obviously, but it brings up the booking engine just like you would have on your website when you click on it. The look and feel is very different here. Obviously, that would match with your look and feel in your template, but it gives you an idea as to how a guest can go ahead and do that. If I want to navigate back to my back end of the system, I can go back into the URL and just type in admin, and we're back into the back end of the system. I'll go back down to Station, under my general settings, and I can deactivate my booking engine if I so choose. And if we go back to Zest Station now, we will see that that's now no longer there. So that's how you can activate and deactivate that. Similarly, if I wanted to turn off pickup key as an option, or I wanted to turn off checkout now as an option, I can just simply do that by unchecking those different options that are there. And again, this is all under Station and General. But let's look at what else we have here. Multi-language support. If you don't want to offer the different languages at the bottom of the screen, that's where you can turn that off and it'll just use the default language. Where you see the Chrome app ID, that's for a specific customer, so you don't need to worry about filling anything in there. Credit card entry method. Most of our customers would be using the Infinia Ingenico iPad only merchant link processor. That's going to be for your EMV devices. So that's what you'd want to use there. For the printer method, if you are printing registration cards or you are printing off folios for guests on checkout, this is where you would decide which printer method you're using. If it's receipt and registration card, StarTech, or AirPrint, for the most part, it's AirPrint that we're using. And you wouldn't need to worry about Zest Station Handler. That again is for a specific customer. For key creation, remote encoding is the way to go. So we'll use remote encoding, and that will link with your key card vendor, and just send the message to the encoder that we have associated with the workstation. Out of order threshold, if we want to put a threshold in here, that's how many times we can have an issue with that particular workstation before it goes out of order. Maybe if the key encoding failed for some reason, it doesn't need to go out of order immediately. It'll keep trying until it hits that threshold before it actually goes out of order. Now the guest ID scanning, that's where we saw the manual ID verification. That's where that was enabled. And you can see go to user setup to put a PIN code into each user. So that's where I had that enabled for the doorbell sound where the guest actually calls for someone to come and manually verify their ID. And here at the bottom is where I uploaded those images that you saw during the check-in flow, the creation of the key image, the holding the key against the sensor in the elevator, as well as inserting the credit card into the EMV device. So you can put in a picture of your EMV device or your credit card terminal. You can put a picture of your key encoder, someone holding your key against the key encoder. You can attach those and make that part of the flow for you too. Okay, moving back to the main menu, let's now take a look at our checkout options, or sorry, our check-in options, I should say. Registration card delivery. Depending upon your setup, we can email, we can print, and we can auto print the registration card. So some of you have probably been in hotels where you have that that registration card that'll automatically kind of spit out at you from an Epson printer when you check in. It'll have your room number on there, as well as some basic information. That's the situation where you'd have print with auto print. And whatever information you have in the registration card here will print off on that little docket for you. Here's your room number. Be sure to join us in the lobby for happy hour at 5 p.m. Whatever you want to have written in there will print out there. If you only wanted to email and be like a welcome email, which is how we have it set up right now, then you would just leave email selected, and then guests can choose to have this welcome email. The text in registration card text here is HTML customizable, as you can see. So you can definitely make that as pretty as you would like it to be. Offer early check-in. As we are doing early check-ins at this property, we do want to offer early check-in, and that then will allow the guests to purchase an early check-in. If they get to the kiosk at say 8 a.m. and we're offering early check-ins, it will prompt them during the flow that they're a little early. If they choose not to take the early check-in, then we'll have verbiage on the screen that we can customize. It could be, if they accept the early check-in, great. If they don't accept the early check-in, we'll be more than happy to store your bags for you until check-in time. Please see the bell desk. Whatever verbiage it is that you want to put in there, you can customize for that particular screen. On-screen room number, that is optional. Some hotels like to use it, some don't. If you have the print option here and you're printing it out, then maybe you don't need the room number to be on screen. But if we're doing the email, we probably do, because it's really the one chance for the customer to see the room number on screen, unless they're getting their email immediately. So we recommend having that switched on for most customers. Second, authentication. That's what I was talking about during that check-in flow where we were able to see the departure date, the confirmation number, the number of nights, and the email is the one option that I was saying wasn't present. You can choose up to three. You could just choose one if you want to. Email, again, I suggest not using as much because we do have those third-party OTAs like Expedia, Booking.com that oftentimes give us a different email address from the one that the guest booked with. So when they put in their Gmail, for example, it doesn't pull up the reservation. Confirmation number, however, will work with third-party confirmation numbers so long as they're being provided by your CRS system. So if they come and they put in their Booking.com confirmation number, it should still pull up the reservation for you. We can collect the guest's nationality if that's something that's important for your region. We can toggle this on and it will prompt them to input their nationality. If you're using overlay with Opera, we can also toggle on this OWS guest messages, and that will present them with any messages that they have in the system. It will appear during the check-in flow so that they don't miss those messages, normally what will be given to them on check-in by a front desk agent, for example. So-and-so called, make sure to reach out to this person. That'll just appear on screen for them. Credit card and payment options. So we have the option to enforce deposit. If you have a deposit policy on a reservation and you want to make sure that that's being captured prior to check-in, you can enforce deposit. It's an additional screen that'll just have the guest pay the deposit before they continue with check-in. Optional, again, if you have a deposit rule and the guest is checking in, generally at that point, the authorization will cover that deposit regardless. So it's not necessary, but some hotels do like to have the deposit taken care of before check-in. So that's definitely an option for you. You can bypass signature capture. If signature capture is not something that's essential for your property, you can switch that on. You can bypass credit card authorization. That's a bit of a risky one if you don't want to capture a credit card. you can choose to do so. Generally, we would leave that switched off, so it would look like this. We want to make sure we're capturing a credit card each time the guest is checking in, and only allow credit card guaranteed reservations. If you only wanted to allow guests with credit cards to check in, that might be because you are a property that doesn't have a credit card integration, or you're only using credit cards on file. That would be an option for you to make sure that you're only checking in those guests who do have a credit card on file. Display terms and conditions. Generally, that's something we always want to do. We want to have them to agree to terms and conditions, but if you don't, you can switch that off and that would just bypass that screen. Validate first name and initial. If you're a larger property and you have a lot of guests checking in that tend to have the same name, for example, you might want to validate the first name too. And in doing so, it just asks them to enter their first name also, and it's going to validate that first initial just to narrow down the number of results that are returned. We can collect guest address details. So if we do that, it's going to ask them to enter an address if we don't have one for them, or just confirm their address. And what's nice about that is, again, it gives the guests an opportunity to update their profile if they've made any changes. So they might have moved, maybe the address that we have on file for them is old, or there's a mistake with it. They can review it, they can make changes to it, and it updates their guest card in Rover automatically. If you're a property that uses loyalty programs, airline loyalty programs, or Rover loyalty programs, you can have them update those loyalty programs during the check-in flow, or confirm the loyalty programs by toggling this on, and then it will make that part of the flow too. If we're using ID scanning and facial recognition, Scan ID to find reservations is an option that we can enable for you. So much like when you go to the airport and you pop in your passport, it'll bring up your reservation information for you and go right to the check-in screen for you. And if you're in a jurisdiction where it's important that we collect a passport number, this is a great toggle to activate. We make sure that we collect the passport number for each guest who's checking in so that it can be on your police exports and that kind of information. So fairly simple settings on this screen for check-in. Let's take a look at checkout, also quite simple. Keycard lookup is for a specific integration for a specific customer, so we're not going to talk about that. We're going to look at the left-hand side where we have our guest bill delivery options. Update email so that we can send an invoice via email to the customer, and then print. So if you do have a printer there at the kiosk where you can print out the invoice for the customer, then you can enable that, and then the guests can choose if they want to have it printed out or emailed to them. Most of our customers are just using email because they don't have printers there, but that is an option for you. We do want to collect the balance, generally speaking, on checkout, and this is where you have this option for guest charges, where we saw the guest was able to add those minibar charges, in this case, to the bill on checkout. And if we enable guest charges, as you see with this toggle, it pulls in this list of items. And your items are basically everything that you have configured under your financials and items. So whatever we have listed in here is what becomes available for us to post in the checkout screen. So that's checkout in a nutshell. If we move now to our pickup key options, there are some specific integrations here too for authentication QR code scanner, which we're going to skip over because they're for particular customers too. For the most part, what we need to be worried about on this screen is our authenticate credit card. So that's the toggle that you would use if you wanted to have the last 4 digits verified on the pickup key screen. This is what controls that authenticate credit card. And if you're doing the guest ID scan with the manual staff verification, this is where you would do the re-verify ID here. If you want to also have a staff member come and verify the ID during the pickup key screen too, just like we saw during the check-in, you can also have that part of the flow during pickup keys too, if you so like. Now let's talk about the upsells and add-ons that we saw during the check-in flow. These are controlled during in this screen under add-ons and upsell rooms. So if I go to upsell rooms first, this is the toggle that determines if we want to offer upsell rooms during the kiosk check-in, during the Zest Station check-in. So this toggle will activate that. And you have a couple of different options. Display the room upsell offers by lower price to higher price to lower price, or randomly. You can enforce the maximum number of rooms upsell offers on screen between 1 and 4. So you can just show 2, you can show 3, you can show 4, whatever your preference is. Offer mix when upsell from tier 1 to tier 3 and tier 2 and tier 3. How many of tier 2 do you want to show? How many of tier 3 do you want to show? It's generally 50-50. but you can definitely manage that if you want to and show more of tier 3, more of tier 2 based on your understanding of your business mix and how much you're likely to sell of tier 3 versus tier 2. You can manipulate how much of it shows, how much of one tier shows versus the other. And then there's multiple room upsell offer display types. It's just different ways that it shows on the screen, and you can play around with how that looks on the screen and decide which style looks best for you. Moving back and looking at our add-ons, this is where we can control which add-ons show on the kiosk screen check-in specifically. We have one for Zest Web, which is the email, and then we have one for the kiosk. Now, it might be that you have things on the email that you don't want on the kiosk. It could be that you have champagne on check-in, for example, and at the point the guest is checking in, it might be a little bit too late for that. So that's something that you might not want to offer on check-in. So this is where you can toggle which ones are offered just with this green toggle button and which ones are not offered. Point of note for the add-ons, they do have to be reservation only when they're created. So under rates and add-ons, you can see which ones are actually marked as being upsellable on the various Zest formats. But if I go into 30-minute hot stone massage, for example, and take a look here, you'll note when it loads that it is a reservation only add-on. And that's what allows it to be selectable. It's not associated with rate only. If it's rate only, you will not be able to make it applicable during that flow. So that's where we can select these. A word of note regarding facial recognition and ID scanning, as I mentioned, it does need to be activated for you, and there is a supplemental for that. So if you are interested in that, do reach out to your CSM and we can get the ball rolling for you. Additionally, with regards to templates, if it's not something that we've set up for you already, we would want to have a specific look and feel that matches your website, maybe your brand standards, that kind of information. We need to get the ball rolling for you too. I did also want to mention with regards to the hardware, we do have a good reference here for you on how to lock down the iPads themselves so that only Rover would be working. It's called guided access mode. Many of you will be familiar with it, I'm sure, but for those of you who are not, you can lock the iPad down to make sure that only Rover works on the iPad. So it's called guided access mode. You put in a passcode, and this way only Rover is able to be supported there. It's on Freshdesk, and you can just type in guided access and it'll show you how to lock it down so that people can't get onto Facebook or start taking pictures or doing whatever they want with it. It is just Rover that will work on the iPad itself. I want to briefly move over to a quick PowerPoint. And this is the email that was sent to me. This is the registration email, basically. So imagine this could be printed out on a small Epson printer. Additionally, it can also be emailed. And this is just referencing things like, please connect to Wi-Fi using access code Wexford. Our shuttle bus times are like this, and the pool is open until this time. Here's a link to our website, so on and so forth. You can put all the information in there that the customer would generally get from a front desk agent having a staff interaction. Also, I wanted to talk about our mobile key functionality. So we do integrate with a couple of different vendors for mobile keys. We have OpenKey, we have Keeper, we have Auracode via Control, and we have Zaplocks via API. So those are the four that we work with mostly, and this gives you great functionality because basically during the check-in event, the guest will have, as long as we have their telephone or their email, the guest will get communications from these vendors, such as this email that you'll get from OpenKey, confirm your check-in information at Wexford Bay. Now, because the reservation already existed, this is an email that OpenKey would have sent prior to my arrival, confirming my reservation details. I have the OpenKey app. And actually, when I open the app and I took a screenshot from this app, it's saying check-in is on this date, checkout is on this date. And you'll notice here it says your key will be downloaded automatically when your room is ready. You're all set. So once I get checked in and my room is ready, I get a notification on my OpenKey app. It updates nicely. With my room key, I go directly up to my floor and I'm good to go. I can just open my key. And here's a nice image from Shining Hotels, actually. They're using the Zaplocks API integration of a customer just literally going up to their door, opening their door with their key. It's a very seamless integration. So it's a great option for guests, especially with everything that's going on right now, where we want to be as contactless as possible. This is a real great offering that we can work with. And if you're interested in that, again, definitely reach out to your CSM and we can point you in the right direction. Another thing I wanted to talk about was our hardware and some suggestions for you if you're thinking about moving forward with this. what you can do in terms of look and feel. So we have a bit of a gallery here from some of our customers, and I just wanted to go through this to give you an idea as to how different people have done it and how the different aesthetic can look. So these are just some examples of different ways that it can look from different customers. They're very varied in style, I think we would agree. Different, more modern, some more classic looking, and definitely different aesthetics. So based on your business model, if it's more traditional, we can definitely see it look and work in those different styles based on the kind of hardware that you have around it. So it really is just dependent upon having the iPad in place. Here you have TWA Hotel, which is obviously an airport hotel, very much mirroring the airport style of check-in with their kiosks. Yotel going a little more streamlined there, and then Farmer's Daughter Hotel with a bit more of a rustic look and feel. So you can definitely, use that iPad and just make the surroundings look and mirror the rest of the feel for your lobby. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that we might have. So Erin, I'm going to hand it back over to you for questions.
All right, thank you, Chris, for that insightful presentation. I'd now like to turn over the floor to questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. All right, so the first question is from Stephanie. For ID scanning, so what if, for example, the husband made a reservation, but the wife or another family member wants to check in with the husband's permission? Would they need to contact the hotel directly to add her as a second guest for her to use the mobile check-in?
That's a really great question. So yeah, they would need to be added as a second guest, but it would need to be the primary person on the reservation that is checking in. So that person would need to become the primary reservation holder, basically, which as long as we have, it's really procedural, I guess, for the hotel, but as long as the hotel is willing to switch out the primary person on the stay card, then that person would then be able to check in. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then the next question is from John. Is there a fee associated with ID scan?
There is, because we actually work with a third-party vendor for facial recognition specifically. There is a fee for that, and if you want to, and if you're interested, then our CSM can get you a proposal for how much that would be. Yep.
Great. And then Jane says, for the different languages, does S&T do that for you?
Unfortunately not, and that's really mostly because every hotel has different verbiage for different screens. So it really would need to be someone on property who can translate those different fields for you, because again, one hotel, for example, might call it a room, one hotel might call it a cabin, and the instructions might be insert your credit card versus swipe your credit card. So it does need to be property specific. So it would need to be someone on property who actually does the translations for you.
Great. And then Dave asks, what if I don't have an electronic key integration?
So we do have some customers who don't have key integrations, and we can have manual key pickup, in which case the screen would just present you on the final check-in screen with the screen, and we can change the verbiage based on what you would want it to say, obviously, but probably something like, thank you so much for checking in. Please approach the front desk to collect your keys, something along those lines. But yeah, we definitely have some customers who have this, and it's manual keys that they're using, and it just would then direct them to approach the front desk to collect their keys.
Awesome. And then Megan asks, can I track how many people are using front desk versus kiosk?
Oh, that's a great question, actually. Yes, you can. We have a report called the check-in, check-out report, which will actually show you how many people are checking in and checking out via the different methods that we offer, via Rover check-in, which is your traditional front desk check-in, via Zest web check-in, and via kiosk check-in. So you can actually see what percentages, how many people are checking in and checking out via the different methods that we offer. That's a really good question. Yeah.
All right. And then Kobe asks, can you ask the guest to verify their age at check-in?
Can you ask the guest to verify their age at check-in? So I'm just trying to think if we can do that. Give me just 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Scan ID to find reservations. That is a great question. So I'm assuming that the question, and we can confirm this with Cody, is we want to limit the age of the person checking in. Is that the assumption, that they need to be over a specific age to check in?
Kobe, would you mind verifying that? Yes, that's correct. Thank you,
Okay,
Kobe.
so probably over 21 or such. We can do that with Zest Web. I'm gonna have to get back to Kobe on that one because I'm not 100% sure that that's something that we have the option to do at the moment. So let's stick a pin in that one, Kobe, and if we can, we'll get back to you. If you can just drop in your email address into the chat box.
Kobe,
Yeah.
I'm gonna enter my email address for you, and you can email me that question, and I'll forward it on to Chris.
That was a good one. You got me with that one.
All right. And right now, okay, one more from Stephanie. She also wants to, Stephanie, I'll chat you my email address and I'll copy you on that as well. All right, and then are there any more questions from anyone? Give everyone a few more seconds to enter those. All right, since there are no more questions, I'd like to take to the floor to offer some final thoughts. All right, so in this webinar, we demonstrated how to configure Zest Station for check-ins and checkouts. We learned how to integrate with mobile keys to allow for contactless check-in, and we illustrated how to include add-ons and upsells to generate incremental revenue. As always, if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at aaron.fisher@stayntouch.com. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.